Loud. All right. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Abby. How are you today?
Good. Thanks so much for meeting with me and sharing your experience with Aphasia Recovery Connection and people who I hope are finding what we have to offer as helpful information for living with aphasia, whether they are someone who has aphasia themselves or whether they care for or communicate with someone who does have aphasia. And before we get into the specific question that we'll address, why don't you tell me how aphasia shows up in your life and how long you have known it?
All right. Well, my husband Mark had a stroke 9 years ago, exactly 9 years ago, totally out of the blue, unexpected. And just like everyone else, we've gone through many, 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 many phases. For those of you who are watching who have been at this for a long time, like myself, you're in a different place than the people who are watching who are at the beginning. So the information that I'm going to be talking about today is really meant for people who have been on this twisty road for a couple of years. But in any event, he had his stroke. We went through all the beginning phases and stages, and here we are 9 years later. And I'd like to share some of the things that I've discovered along the way.
Okay. And I think specifically we talked about your observations and feelings about how other people in your life and Mark's life, whether it be your friends or family members, how they've learned to include aphasia in their lives and be able to maintain the relationship as friend or family member, and what it took for you and Mark, or maybe particularly in your case, to let those people know how to continue to include Mark in conversations. Because in the beginning, as you said, that early phase, people are in shock and they're not focused so much on maintaining a relationship as much as they are focused on helping and making things easier and making things go away. And once that acute crisis phase ends and people stop showing up with offerings and gift cards and casseroles, and then your life sets into its new place, how then do the people who have helped so much in the beginning continue to do so without feeling either like they're overstepping boundaries, but rather how have your friends been able to include themselves in your lives and not let aphasia keep them away?
Okay, so there's two different parts to that question. And since you mentioned friends, we'll address the friend part before we address meeting new people, because that's a little bit different. When you're dealing with friends of long standing, let's put it that way. Uh, my theory is that part of it is that they're just afraid, whether they're afraid that this is going to happen to them, and I'm sure there's a big piece of that going on, and they're afraid they'll do the wrong thing. They're just afraid of something, and I don't necessarily know that we're even going to know what that something is. Now, of course, there are the meanies out there, and there are certain people who just are just not going to be part of your life no matter what. So we don't really have control over that. If that's who these people are, that's who they are. What I really feel that we as a caregiver has to focus on is training them. I am not shy. I have taught friends how to, I call it talk Mark. I've taught them all of the strategy that all the wonderful SLPs have taught me. I've taught them how to cue. I've taught them different techniques. And don't be shy. You have to say to them privately, not in front of your loved one, but you have to say to them, you know what, call, in my case, Mark, call Mark, text him. Assuming your loved one is able to do that, but you have to stay on top of them, because I just really feel that there are very few people who are going to stick it out unless you give them that gentle shove. And it becomes a weeding out process. And you will find after a certain point that there are people that you know will be there for you, and there are some who will not. And that's okay. Also, if you can possibly, if you're in an area where there are aphasia centers, or there are areas where you can meet people in a similar situation, you're going to get new friends. And that's happened to us as well. We have, our friends of long standing, and we now have such a wonderful circle of people that we have met through our aphasia
So
center.
when you mentioned your new friends and how you introduce aphasia or make sure people understand that Mark might not communicate the same way they do. Are the new friends you're referring to friends from an aphasia center, or are they friends you might find at a local
It could
community
be
event?
anywhere. I'll give you an example. We recently moved to Florida, and we really did not know anybody in the community that we moved into. And physically, Mark looks absolutely fine. And this is what I do when we meet new people. I will say, "Hi, I'm Barbara. This is Mark. Mark had a stroke X number of years ago. Mark has aphasia." And I immediately say, and this is so important, I immediately say, "Do you know what that is?"
Mhm.
Now, what do you think? Do you think most people know what it is?
I think it's a
Absolutely.
skin condition.
Right. They have no clue. Now, you might get somebody who might say yes. And then I go, "Really? What?" And maybe
Right,
they tell you, maybe they don't. But I give them the briefest explanation. So I'll go into a textbook explanation, but just say,
right.
due to the stroke, the brain is not connecting to the mouth. And Mark knows everything he wants to say and everything, and he understands everything. So please talk directly to him. This is very important. Make eye contact with him. And I'll even say this in front of Mark. I mean, Mark is at the point where he has no issue if I do that. Now, if you know your loved one isn't comfortable with that, then you have to have that conversation
Right.
privately.
That's something I'm really glad you mentioned, because you had said you tell people, how to talk Mark. And I hope that Mark, and I assume Mark trusts that when you're telling people about him, he's either hearing you share that information, or that you and he have gone over the fact that that is something you,
Yeah.
as his communication partner, will help sort of translate to others.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And so he doesn't mind or roll his eyes. There's Barbara telling them what to do.
No,
No.
no, it's very important. If your partner is cognizant and is aware, as most of them are, it is a good thing to pre-discuss how you're going to handle things. Even going into the doctor's office, if we go to a new doctor, the doctor tends to talk to me. And I will say immediately, "Mark has aphasia. Please talk to him. If I need to jump in, I will." And most of them are pretty good, although they still tend to make the eye contact with me. But I'll actually turn my head away because I want them to look at him. But that's really important.
All
Now,
right.
I have an interesting story. I don't know if we have time for
Well, we're
it.
supposed to be within a certain number of minutes, but why don't you share it and we'll see how we can fit it
Okay,
in.
all right. Because this just happened. Just happened. A friend of long standing, and I mean really long standing, like 30 plus years. We went out to dinner just the other night. And when Mark and I were at the restaurant first, the other couple came in, and the male he looked, well, not that the female didn't, but the male looked very nice. And Mark started saying what Mark wanted to say was, "Oh, you look so nice. I like your shirt, whatever." And he was having a little bit of difficulty. So our friend said to him in a very abrupt voice, "Mark, I am absolutely not following. I do not know what you are trying to say." Mark immediately shut down, immediately shut down. I was shocked, to tell you the truth. We went through the dinner, but look, we know we can read our loved ones. He was miserable. So anyway, on the ride home, I said to Mark, "How did you feel about that?" And of course, he was very upset. He was hurt, surprised, whatever. So I said, "Would you like me to talk to Michael about it?" He said no. So I said, "Okay, I would honor that request." So a few days go by, and I really wanted to talk to this friend about it. So I finally got permission, and I did address it with a friend without Mark being there. He was shocked. "You're kidding." He said, "I love you. I can't believe I did that." So again, I'm just using it as an example. He was so grateful that I pointed that out to him. So, again, it is going back to where we started. This doesn't end. It just
And you
keeps
know what's really
going.
interesting? Before we recorded, you and I were talking about how we interpret written communication and how we sometimes respond to people that are very close to us. And sometimes one's tone and one's reaction, aphasia or not, can land on the other person in a really uncomfortable way. And
Mhm.
what I love that you're pointing out, and what I would highlight too, is that no matter what type or when aphasia is present, if there's a communication discomfort or breakdown, we shouldn't excuse it, because it bothered you, it bothered Mark, and your friend realizes now that he wasn't aware of it. He was being himself. So by you guys bringing it up to all of your attention, I think it was a perfect example that we shouldn't use aphasia as an excuse. That
Yes,
when we're uncomfortable with something, you got to get it off your chest.
definitely. Yes.
Thank you I hope people appreciate your honesty that you shared with us, and that you're honest with your good friends about how you feel
Hmm.
and what they can do to
Hmm.
include you and Mark as they always had.
Definitely good. I hope what I said was helpful, but what I really would like to leave people with who are struggling with this, and that's not to say I still don't struggle and I still don't get frustrated and I don't have bad days. Um, this is a journey. It's not going to go away. And as long as you, at some point, you have to find in your heart that you know that this is going to be going on, and you have to find ways to cope, not only to help your loved one, but to help yourself. And I'm a big advocate for self-care as much as you possibly can do it, whether it's, if you're able to say to your partner, look, I just need a break. I need to go inside for an hour. You're sitting watching TV. You're fine. If you're able to go out, you should go out.
Right.
Even if it's just for that hour, just to take, if it's just the walk. Some of us are luckier and can leave for extended periods of time. Some of us can. Everybody will have to, adjust their schedule to their specific needs. But just stay strong. I always call us, we're warrior men and women,
Absolutely.
because
And self-care, like
yeah,
you mentioned, doesn't mean you're selfish.
that's right.
And that again, I don't want to make this just about aphasia to seem like it's such an, anomaly and that it's so strange from everything else. But recognizing your own needs apart from being a spouse is also a good point to highlight. Thank
Yeah.
you for
All
sharing
right.
with us
My
and our
pleasure.
community.
My pleasure.